4, and queen a4 check has been dodged because we can just meet that move with this move b5, and he can't get the pawn back, which was his point. However, after queen c2, we don't really have a better move than knight bd7, and then after bishop g2 takes b5, we'll see that this is actually the same position as if white played queen a4 check, knight bd7, which is what I'm recommending, queen takes c4, a6, bishop g2, b5. So we can see that white can still manage to get to this position, so we still have to look at it. If you are interested in this a6 move order, white does have this option of c5, but I think then black can just play b6. Milov and Yuri Shulman are players who played this as black if you want to look into it. And after something like in that c5 position, after c takes b6, c takes b6, it seems like a fairly equal position, so similar pawn structure. But at any rate, after queen a4 check, knight bd7, queen takes c4, a6, bishop g2, b5, white's queen now has a choice as to where to go. And no matter where he goes, unless he goes to c6, which has to be the critical line, black is just going to play bishop b7 first, just to get on the diagonal and avoid tricks with this bishop. And then he's just going to push c5 and have an easy game. After d takes c5, he gets his bishop out with tempo. And if he doesn't play d takes c5, well, then black can just play c takes d4 or c4, depending, and have a fairly equal position. So the critical line has to be this move queen c6, which attacks this rook in the corner and is pressurizing this pawn. And the main move here is rook b8. White will follow up with bishop f4. Now he's threatening to take this pawn. So black plays knight d5, which guards the pawn. And white plays bishop g5 and bishop e7, takes, knight c3. So there's a tactical idea behind knight c3. First of all, this move knight b4 has been played, but the computer seems to think queen takes c7 is just crushing. And this check, even though you get this in the corner, it seems like this knight's not going to get out. And if you ask the computer, it just already thinks that white is, oh, maybe not here. Yeah, as it thinks a bit, it says it's like +2. So I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe the knight gets out, and this is like a trapped piece algorithm. Already giving bonus points to white, but I think it looks a little scary, so I can't really recommend this knight b4 stuff. Instead, bishop b7 leads to a forced line, and I think this is pretty equal. So the first thing to notice is that white's queen is trapped, but he has this move knight takes d5, and now he's attacking our queen. So after this kind of forced line where we take his queen, he takes our queen, we take the piece back, and he plays rook c1 attacking this bishop. Well, now there's two ways black can play this position. Peter Leko played, and it seems like black gets enough for his pawn if he just plays this way. Just gets the bishop to a good square. Rook takes c7, rook hc8, rook a7, rook a8, takes, king d2, and now we play knight f6. So where is black's compensation here? Well, he wants to get a rook to this 7th if he can, which is hard in a lot of lines because he can play like knight e1 or even just rook b1 and guard the b pawn. But one of the main ideas is to play this move knight e4 check and win f2. And if the king goes somewhere, like e3 or e1 to guard f2, well, then the rook comes in on the 7th. But I think after a sequence like knight e1, bishop takes, knight takes, I can't really. I think white still has a little something here. This Leko game, he played this move rook d8. Well, maybe it was Hansen Van Wheelie. Rook d8, e3, knight e4 check, king e2, rook c8. But here it was, I don't like this move knight e1. Like, I think if you just played this move rook g1, I don't know that black quite has compensation for his pawn, but I mean, maybe, if you just like to get to endings where you have a lot more activity than your opponent, you've got him kind of tied down, and you don't mind being down a pawn for it, then, maybe this is okay. So I'll leave that if you want to actually decide to play that way. Another way to play it, which is the way Serper played it, is not to go in for this pawn down line, but just stubbornly play rook b6. And after a move like castles, you play rook c8 so that you can now, the idea is to guard this pawn so that you can move this bishop. And after something like knight g5 takes, you play rook d6. We have this really forced line with e3, c5, d takes c5. And now, if we look at this position, if we play like rook takes c5, then he may be able to play this move knight e4, And this might be playable, but it seems like, white might have a little something here. Although the computer seems to think no, that he can just play rook d5 and this is equal. But they usually play rook d5 here. I guess the idea is that you're attacking the knight, so it's not like he has time to guard this pawn. So there's this sharp line where, there's this c6 move. Well, I guess he can guard the pawn with like a move like knight e4, so we should look at that. But after something like f5, knight back to g5, rook d takes c5, it seems like the initiative is with black here. He's got control of the file. This piece is a little out of play, and the computer thinks that the black has a little edge there. In this position, after knight e5, we're going to win this pawn, but maybe he has time to play something like knight f3 and okay, knight d3. This seems like a little potentially, well, I guess it's hard for him to keep on the. I guess it's hard for him to go anywhere where, because this b2 pawn is hanging. So I guess computer's just saying rook b1, rook takes c6, and again I think this is pretty equal. And this, you kind of have to be willing to play this if this is one reason I like that a6 move order, because you can sometimes trick white players out of even getting into the queen a4 line. But I don't think this is anything to be afraid of, and in any opening you have to be willing to play some of these things where white can just get to an equal position if he wants. This is not the most common move, I guess probably because it goes for this ending. So if a white player is trying to keep playing the position, they'll generally play queen c2. If we look at some of these alternatives like queen d3, I think you can just play the standard plan, bishop b7, castle c5, and after a move like a4 we can play c4, and I think this position is really good. Even though he gets the center, we're ready to strike back with e5, and like if he played e5 here, then he's just surrendering control of this square, which in the Catalan, getting the light squares like this, this move e5 is seldom a good idea with the pawn on d4, because there's like this idea with the knight coming in, the light squares just get all hideously weak. And against queen b3, you can play kind of a similar line, like bishop b7. Again, if he castles, you get to the same position we just looked at with queen d3. If he plays something like a4 right away, again, you can just play c5. Like even if he takes on b5 here, you can take on d4, and this position seems totally equal. I mean, yeah, white theoretically has a passed b pawn here, but he still can't take the d pawn back, so you've got a center pawn. So if anything, I think black might be slightly better here. Yeah, actually, the computer is saying minus 1 point over -1, so it's saying this pawn is worth a lot more than this, and black's pieces all get out. So in this line, black never has to struggle to get his pieces out. So I think that it's kind of harmless, but you still have to be ready for it. You just have to remember that our basic plan is to play bishop b7 and c5, and that you're playing knight bd7 in response to the check. So here the main line. There are actually a lot of moves that have been played in this position. We have a4, we have d takes c5, but d takes c5. This is not this. You have to be a little careful, because the idea behind d takes c5 is that he gets this rook d1 move, and your queen can be a little uncomfortable. But I think that it's okay because black also gets the c file. So if we look at, for example, like a typical game, knight c3. Rook c8. This is the standard sort of plan, is to put the rook there. Here's like a3 or queen d3, but you don't really need help finding these moves. Black castles, and something like bishop f4. The learner played this move, knight b6, knight e5, takes. You generally never hesitate to trade the Catalan bishop. And, I mean, black has his fair share of play here. This looks like just a kind of an equal position between 2,400 players. Let's see what the computer thinks. Yeah, again, it thinks, black is fine. So d takes c5, not too scary, because you're going to get this file. What other moves were there here? Bishop g5 has been played. But again, it seems like this plan of rook c8 is the idea, and you threaten c takes d4, so moving the queen like queen d2. But this seems like a good position. The computer is recommending the novelty of just playing c takes d4, although queen b6, as played a couple of times, seems fine too. Because the queen kind of needs a good square in this line. So yeah, queen b6 is fine. Again, it's saying black is doing well here. After something like knight c3, c takes d4. In the game, the guy played queen takes d4. And instead of playing queen takes d4, I think this move bishop c5 would have been a better choice. The computer agrees. Let's see, were there other... a4 was the most common, but there's a lot of things that grandmasters have tried here, like rook ft1, and again, rook a c8, and there's a game here, Hübner Nadish, which Nadish won, queen d2 takes. So this simple plan, you play c5, rook c8, and c takes d4, and then just, if he hasn't played d takes c5, you just play bishop e7 and develop the bishop here, and then you just expand on the queen side. This is not something I feel like I have to go over a lot of theory on, because I think it's just easy, natural moves for black. So just for completeness' sake, I'm covering it in these lines, but I don't think it's anything really. This system is pretty quiet. So if white tries something like a4, black has a variety of responses, but I'm recommending here just pushing b4. And again, if we go to the database, d takes c5 has been played. But again, you just play bishop takes c5, and after something like knight bd2, rook a c8, queen d3, castles. White will always move his queen somewhere. Again, I think we're fine. And there's a game here, Menezia and Nasipiano. You notice that black seems to do really well in all these. Again, white trades the bishops, black doesn't hesitate to do it. And here, this seems like kind of an equalish ending, but I guess, black has, his knights are obviously posted on very good squares here on d5 and c4. He's got the rooks on the open files. So, even though he's traded queens, this seems like a fine position. And I think black is doing really well here. And yeah, the computer's saying -2. Well, I guess a4 is hanging in this position. Because if he tries a move like b3, we have f5 followed by knight c3 attacking the rook. So like after he moves here, we go here attacking this rook, and then this knight's free to move. So yeah, that's a powerful game from Nasipianu. And so yeah, but if he just keeps developing and doesn't take, we still same plan, rook c8. And then eventually here, I think he's going to have to take. Maybe he can move the queen here. Yeah, some 2300s have moved the queen, queen d3. But again, I have a feeling some simple plan with like c takes d4. Yeah, the computer always wants to play this move c takes d4, and just considers, if he takes with a queen, then we get bishop c5 with tempo, which is another common idea. You take and then get bishop c5 with tempo anyway, and then he moves somewhere. Here's a Jurovsky game, a 2400 beating up on a 2200. With just castles is fine here. So we can flip open this game. I like flipping through some of these games because it just gives you an idea of how this line is pretty good, fine for black. So that was an interesting little tactical melee, sacrificing. Yeah, I mean he winds up losing something here. Cute. So yeah, against queen a4 check. So just to summarize, against the queen a4 check stuff, I'm just recommending to play the bishop b7. Play knight bd7 to block. Play this a6 and b5. Play your bishop to b7, your pawn to c5, and then you're going to get rook c8 in, and then bishop c5, and then your queen should have a comfortable way into the game, either on e7 or b6 or c7 or somewhere. So I think it's pretty easy development, and I don't think I need to spend a lot of time going over this. The critical line is this queen c6, and you just kind of have to look at these forcing lines and decide if you want to play bishop b7 or not. Sorry, I think you should play bishop b7. But you just have to decide if you want to sack the pawn here or play rook b6. I think rook b6. I think they're both fine for black. So I decided I'm not going to make a fifth video. I'm not going to go over move order tricks. I just think it's too opening dependent on whether or not you play the QGD or the NIMZO, and I don't want to have to go through all these different move orders. So I figure Since I play the Queen's Gambit Decline, I may just make a series of videos on the Queen's Gambit Decline and discuss